So for these souls who awaken, whatever be the reasons, and we'll speak of that quality, of some of the qualities or aspects of awakening. But the real problem is the awakening itself. Because awakening itself is a disruption of the very thing that allowed you to organize as a person. It's often a shattering of that. And what happens in that event is something beyond us. The first thing is the shattering event of the nature of the consciousness is it pushes up our ignorance. It pushes up the unconscious structures of our habit of being a person, of our desires and our wants, to the surface all at once. Maybe to the extent where it all gets stripped away. Well, then what happens? Well, in this culture, you go to a doctor, you go to a psychologist, you get arrested, you get put in an institution. Because the qualities that allowed you to behave in a society where the agreement is to suppress that interfering with the purpose of material life, which has its own reason for existing and has its own role. So this is what happens. You become an outlaw. You become a violation. You become a breaker of the rule. You go outside of the boundary of sanity. But how you hold it, how you are able to be with it, has a lot to do with how you lived your life up to that point. People, as I look into the nature of people who have been with me, I would say half of them are not actually spiritually awake. Rather, they're in intoxicated imaginations. Like evangelists, people follow evangelist teachers. It comes from frequencies of the human vital and the human intellect, where imagination and dreams and fantasies are created. It comes into creating an agreement of the fantasy with your mental and vital body, which may have nothing to do with the truth of you as a person or in the truth of the awakening that may be involved in your imaginings. The idea in the exaltation of a human vital or mental it's a false approximation of what happens with the true awakening. So you get inspired. There's no wrong or right. Matter of fact, inspiration and poetry and art are all expressions of that inspiration, but it's not awakening. It's rather a refining of the vibration of our mind and intellect and consciousness that can allow for that sensitivity to the subtler dimensions that already exist as a human being. Part of the human system is this extraordinary quality of the being that gets formed with the first ego. And the quality of that being as the first ego it's an interface between our lower nature and our higher nature. I call it the psychic being. It's not the true self. It's rather a derivative of the egoic mental vital structure. In itself has no authority except what it can derive from the authority of the human ego in the person's body. And it's a blessing, because it's through that subtle body that we can get in touch with how nature is holding us. It can be touched with the quality of our being a piece of the creation. This is in the psychic body, not spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening is not an exaggeration of the higher mental or the higher vital, or even the refinement of the physical that feels like it can touch something. These are beautiful things. They're part of being a human being. But in themselves, they cannot be expression of the purpose. It's only when awakening has come, the blessing and the curse, the grace, which is actually a curse, of breaking through that shroud. So the Bhagavad Gita speaks in these first 6 chapters of the effort of coming out of the shroud of imaginings. But it uses the imaginings that loved Jesus, the sacrifice of the saints, the nobility that comes from people who live for other people as an expression, a human expression of the purpose. Even though there's attachment and there's fear and there's desire and there's separation, there's still these beautiful beings comparative to other human beings. It's all preparatory. It's still in the gunas. It's still ruled by the cycles and the position of the planets. This is why these exalted states don't last, because the true awakening hasn't come. The awakening has to be in the entire system. It can't be just in the higher psychic body. It has to be embodied and awakened, be a role in awakening the whole system. But the psychic body has no power in itself, except for what the person has, what they've developed through the maturing of their own humanity in existence. And that's a crapshoot. You can be a saint one life and debauched the next. You don't know what it's like or what's hidden, because we're all a piece of the collective error. The fact that you're here now and listening to this and receiving the transmission, the fact that you can experience transmission, the fact that there's spiritual energy and you're experiencing the spiritual energy and able to be conscious with it enough to recognize there's a purpose and there's an unfolding of that spiritual energy, takes many, many lives to be able to know the difference between imagining and the real thing, between hope and idealism and the real thing, between a sentimental experience or an emotional experience and the true experience of divine love. So how does it work? It will only work if there's a Krishna, something more than you, that finds you, or you find it. Then what you have is something that can take you beyond your own psychic being, take you beyond your ego, beyond your intellect, beyond your mind, and start using the fire in your body to transform the vehicle of you, that all of those can join in that higher part of you that is tuned in till it comes through the Krishna. Because when it's both there and here in form, a tremendous power is possible. Its only purpose is to light the fire in others. So when we look at the Bhagavad Gita, we're looking at something, it's kind of, it's not the truth itself. It's an approximation that's pointing to the nature of the journey. It's a pointer to the role and the stages of ourselves in that unfolding, especially in these first chapters. This organization of our action, of the choice we make, is what determines if your awakening, when it happens, and I'll speak of this more when we get into the aspects of the first 6 chapters, is able to grow, is able to integrate, is able to become lived. And there's stages. But the only way it can be done is through a sufficient capacity to choose and to stay true to the choosing that comes. To keep your word with yourself. To have sufficient sense of your own self-worth, that you honor your choices rather than doubt your choices. This gathering of that inner strength doesn't come from your psychic being. It's not capable. It comes from the supreme being that is the source of you already. It is the I am. It is me, the idea of a me. The idea of that there is others. The principle of that is the seed of your intelligence. It's the seed of your ego. It's the seed of your existence. When that grows in you, then you have the strength to act on your choice, to honor it as if your choice is a sacred opportunity that's come through you to make. Very different. It's not something you can just surrender to. It's something you have to actively co-create. It requires a quality of faith to believe in yourself sufficiently that you will honor the sacred unfolding. That's already apparent to you in your psychic being, but it's probably not apparent at all to the habit of you in your mental, vital, physical design. So you lose your access to it. Doesn't mean it goes away. It's inevitably part of the unfolding that the human gets dragged along in order to transmute it. The Mother Book speaks of this. The Gita speaks to it. Your own experience speaks to it. But on your own, it would not be able to burn steadily so that the journey can be traveled in its fullness. There are stages. In the first chapter, the stage comes in the 6th chapter when you now reside in the true self that has its origin in the Supreme Being of which you're an expression of. And there is the sense of having reached the goal at that point. So the first 6 chapters, the striving and the efforting and the processing of the first 6 chapters, this is the arena that tests your capacity to collaborate with the awakening, the true awakening when it's happened. Recognizing a true awakening. I was fooled too. People would come into my energy and they'd just be so thrilled, and I would see the divinity in them. But when they weren't in my energy, it all went back to normal. Because it wasn't able to land. It wasn't able to, the soils weren't ready. Or they held on for a period, and then something in their nature got repulsed or got overtaken. Because it hadn't been a full awakening, it had been derivative. So when people come to a spiritual teacher, you can have an approximation of an awakening, but if it's not your own, it will fade. And that's why you go to a spiritual teacher and it's not been your awakening, it's been a derivative of their awakening. You'll end up seeking other spiritual teachers so you can replicate the same thing and you'll repeat the same pattern. It may happen that in 1 out of 2 or 3 teachers, it will push you through that particular boundary where you can own and become the conscious, active collaborator with the further unfolding. When that happens, then that choice, that ability to choose itself is the supreme in you, taking past beyond yourself. Now for some, for some, this particular form was the necessary expression. And I can tell you that because even though they're repulsed or gone, I'm still very much that which they are linked with me is still actively there, taking them through the processes that they need to do in order for that awakening, that possibility of awakening to truly happen. Because it's always in full ownership of that which had been in the way of the awakening itself. It's a call up to the truth, the reality, not the state of exaltations, not the gratitude, not even the divine love, but that fundamental place where worthiness is not the question. It is what is. I am what is. I am that. So that itself, to become articulate, to become real, is then allows for the following chapters of Gita to be useful. To organize your ability to recognize the predicament that you're awakened into and your role in it, not only for yourself, but for those who come to you and to the world.